What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Pro Football Focus Show here for the Week 12/Thanksgiving Special Edition. I'm Britt Devine here with the usual suspects, Scott Barrett and Tyler Beaker. Mr. Tybo, lots I like the food. We've got football. I posted a little thing on Twitter earlier today. I did pie rankings. I don't know if you caught that. Number 1 was peanut butter pie. Number 2 was peanut butter pie. Number 3 was peanut butter pie. I like peanut butter pie. It's by far the best one. Where do you sit on pie rankings?
I didn't know that was a thing, but I think I'm going to peanut butter pie for tomorrow.
Scott, have you ever had the peanut butter pie where it's like you mix it with the Cool Whip and you put it in the Oreo crust? It's like the most delicious thing ever.
I've never heard of it.
Oh my goodness. You got to look this thing up. You got to have your parents, a sibling. Someone's got to make this for you guys. It's by far the best Thanksgiving treat. Scott, what are you looking forward to more tomorrow? Are you looking forward to watching football or stuff in your face?
I've eaten like drive-through, aka like McDonald's or something like that for Thanksgiving dinner for 3 years in a row now. I'll be watching the games and writing my articles. Not a big fan of Thanksgiving. But am looking forward to some of these games, specifically the New Orleans game, which should be awesome. Mm-hmm. What about you guys? Sorry to be a buzzkill.
Yeah, like Debbie Downer over here. I'm talking it up, and Scott's like, I hate Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Well, Scott, now that you set the mood for us that low, I want to bring it back saying Thanksgiving is probably the best holiday in the world. We've got a day full of football, friends, family, a ton of food, beverages, whatever you want. I'm excited for it. Looking forward to it.
I understand where Scott's coming from, right? Because on a normal Thursday, it's like one late Thursday football game. And he's a big shot over at PFF, Tyler, right? He's got to work all day on Thursday. So I could see why it probably gets a little down for you, right, Scott?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I get it from Scott's perspective. So what we're going to do today, we're going to do it a little different. We're going to talk, I don't know, probably 10 to 15 minutes. Basically just have a little conversation of the Thursday slate. If you're listening on the podcast and the Thanksgiving games have passed, I would tell you to fast forward, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes or so. And then we're going to get into some main slate analysis. So let's start with the first game, Chicago at Detroit. Scott, I'll start with you. We got some word. Looks like Mitchell Trubisky's probably not going to play. Chase Daniel, cheap quarterback. I don't know. You have to tell me. Let's try to dive into Chase Daniel and try to figure out if he's worth playing on any of our teams today. What do you got for me?
I'm not sure how much I like him. I will say Mitchell Trubisky, per our data, per our grading process, it's been really hard on him. Some of our analysts have likened him to Tim Tebow. Yes, it's been that bad. Of course, his numbers look amazing. But really the question is how much of his productivity has been him, how much of it has been Nagy, and our graders think by a wide margin it's been Nagy. Some, maybe there isn't going to be too much drop off there. My problem with him is Colt McCoy is not that much more expensive, and McCoy is a runner.
McCoy's a much better player, quarterback, everything, I believe, as well.
Right. You can look at some of the stats I put out. So since like 2014, he has like a 102 passer rating. And then in preseason game, it's like a 109 passer over a pretty like decent sample. I do think he's actually good. Also, he was clocked at like 22 miles per hour, like one of the fastest times of any player, let alone quarterback. So he does have some wheels. Matchup's not great. Really, I think you're going to want Breeze and then Ryan to a slightly lesser extent. And that's how, a lot of my lineups are shaking up. I just want as much exposure to that game as possible.
Yeah, I was actually hoping Trubisky would play. I was hoping a lot of people would play him. Saw Detroit held Cam Newton in the running. Detroit plays a lot of the zone, a lot easier to keep an eye on the quarterback than the man-to-man. Held Cam Newton, I think it was just like 2 rushing yards last week. I think Trubisky probably could have been stuffed in the run game a little bit. Tyler, what do you think's going on with this game? If you got any Chase Daniel takes, maybe we can talk a little bit about the running backs, a little bit about the passing game for Chicago as well.
It's a 43.5 point total. Not really looking forward to many pieces in this
game. We got to
roster
roster someone on this slate, Tyler. I mean, we all want Saints, right? We all want Falcons. They're all so expensive. We got to mix in somebody else from the other.
Yeah, the one cheap piece I like is Tariq Cohen. I kind of like him if you're trying to get some different running backs in there. My problem is I'm trying to get the 2 Saints running backs and Zeke in every lineup.
Mm-hmm.
There probably won't be a single lineup I go without a running back in the flex because I think these guys have the clearest path to fantasy points. But Tariq Cohen's a guy that's kind of interesting to me considering we saw how often that Chase Daniels checked down during the preseason to his running backs. I think we could see Cohen out in space do a lot of damage here against guys like Gerard Davis, who's been miserable in our PFF coverage grades.
What about the receivers, right? The ADOT for Chase Daniel, probably not going to be too high this week. Who does that favor? To me, that's like a Taylor Gabriel. That's a Tariq Cohen. Does anyone think they just try to force Jordan Howard 20 carries, extend the game, make it like 13-10 or something like that, and try to win with their defense? Does anyone think that's a possibility with Jordan Howard, who's the cheapest I've ever seen him in DFS so far?
Yeah, I just don't see much of a ceiling with Jordan Howard. I mean, unless he gets to the end zone, he's not going to put up much receiving for you. He's been pretty lackluster for the last couple weeks. I do like the idea of going to receivers other than A-Rob, who should be occupied by Darius Slay. The other Detroit cornerbacks are a cakewalk when you go to player matchups there. Really like Taylor Gabriel considering his price. I think he'll be pretty popular though this week.
Yeah, Gabriel's going to be one of the more popular receivers, not named Michael Thomas, Julio, or Kenny Galladay. I can almost guarantee that. Scott, on the flip side, we got Matt Stafford at home, but we got this Chicago defense, which I don't know, by a lot of things, looks really, really good. It's one of the best defenses. John Gruden basically just gave him Khalil Mack, and that's really worked out well for Chicago. He's at home. Somehow they beat Carolina last week. It wasn't pretty. What do you see happening this week for Detroit? Who's kind of your 1 or 2 favorite players from the Detroit offense?
Well, it's going to be Theo Riddick and Kenny Galladay. Galladay, he set a career high in targets 2 weeks ago, was very productive. And then Marvin Jones out last week, set a new career high in targets, another monster day for him. And we know Jones is going to be out this week. He has a soft matchup against the Bears. They're strong everywhere, but they are giving up the 4th most fantasy points per game to outside wide receivers. And then Theo Riddick, who is running more than 50% of his routes as a wide receiver. I think he's seen 8 targets or more in 3 consecutive weeks. I would have liked it more if Trubisky played to ensure that negative game script for him. But yeah, with Galladay out, with Marvin Jones out, like Theo Riddick. But the question is going to be, do you play him or do you play Jordan Howard? But yeah, those are probably the only 2 players on Detroit I look at this week.
What Tyler, Bruce Ellington is kind of the one guy. Last week I thought Riddick was a little thin on the 3-game slate. I think Riddick's much more in play this week because we had Ellington coming in, going to play a lot of the slot, got himself, what was this? I think it was 9 targets last week. Yeah, 9 targets. What are we going to do with him? He's questionable. I would imagine he's probably going to play by my accounts here. He's cheap. It fits to help you kind of get your preferred lineup of jamming in a bunch of the expensive running backs. I think Ellington's a fine play. I like Riddick. I like Galladay. Those are probably the only 3. I'm less enamored with Matt Stafford. I just find it hard for him to get it done and win over guys like even a Dak Prescott and specifically Matt Ryan or Drew Brees. So I'm more focused on those 3, and you got to take a couple of stands. But what's your quick thoughts on Ellington before we move to the next game?
There's another cheap wide receiver I'd rather pivot to. I don't like putting a ton of eggs in a basket off a guy that's really cheap, that's coming off a big week. Normally, they don't always follow that up with a subsequent big week. Ellington, I thought he came out of nowhere. I was on board with the Riddick 6 to 8 target theory last week, so that kind of burned me quite a bit. But I don't know. Ellington was limited in practice all this week. I think Galladay is probably the best lock and bang for your buck wide receiver here.
And LeGarrette Blount, right, with Kerryon Johnson, not going to play. Has he been ruled out yet, or is he still up in the air? Yeah, he's been ruled out. LeGarrette Blount, 2 yards per carry, fall into the end zone once or twice. Does this do it for anybody?
If you want to be super contrarian, but not for me.
He's going to draw a little bit of ownership, I would suspect. Let's go to the next game. Scott, Let's talk Dallas here first, right? Because it's probably the other offense I think most people are targeting. And of course, you got to look at Zeke, who is just looking like a true workhorse right now, smashing game after game after a somewhat reasonably slow start to the season. It's all coming to fruition for him now. Those were against Philadelphia, whose run defense I think is extremely overrated, and Atlanta. We all know what happens when you're a running back against Atlanta. Do you think he can get it done against Washington?
Yeah, absolutely. He's smashing. He's seeing the best volume of his career. Washington isn't a prohibitive matchup by any stretch. The slate's really going to come down to pick 3 out of Zeke, Kamara, Julio Jones, Michael Thomas. I think that's what I'm seeing on 100% of the lineups I've seen so far. But Zeke seems like someone you're going to want in there.
Yeah, I think Zeke currently projected right behind Kamara in ownership. If I had to choose, I know it's running backs against Atlanta, but I still think I'd take Elliott. I think the more true workload lies with him than with Kamara and, really good efficiency. Where do you stand between those two, Tyler, if you were forced to pick?
I'm at 100% for both right now.
Yeah, all right. So Tyler's literally like both.
Yep.
There is no wrong answer. Yeah, you got to like Zeke. What else? I think Dak is pretty playable as well here. I think he's my preferred non-Saints game quarterback by far. You can use Cooper. You've got some narratives with Michael Gallup. Had himself, a little bit of a personal week. I think with the death of his brother, he's going to be coming back. You got to think, hey, maybe they try to get him a touchdown or something like that. I think Cooper could probably bounce back a little bit here. Washington's defense is really reeling right now. What's your favorite non-Zeke play from this game?
It's probably going to be the Dallas Cowboys defense. Like that matchup here against Colt McCoy, who has an 11.7% sack percentage over the last 4 years with the Redskins. For reference, only Josh Allen and Marcus Mariota have a higher percentage so far this year. So that's up there. And we're seeing that this Cowboys defensive line is getting after quarterbacks right now. I really like that correlation play of Zeke and his defense.
Scott, what else you got for me in this game? Is there anything from Washington really stand out? We saw Jordan Reed rise from the ashes with Colt McCoy kind of chucking him the ball a little bit there. And McCoy, I don't know. It seems like you like McCoy as a quarterback. Can you really be worse for fantasy than Alex Smith has been this year? I think it's kind of tough to be that. I don't mind shot taking on McCoy a little bit here, but I do like the Dallas defense. What do you have for me on McCoy that's going to kind of get somebody to play him for me?
I'm not going to play him. I'm going to have Breeze and maybe a little bit of Matt Ryan. But like I said, he is playable. Mari Cooper, good volume since coming to Dallas, but he's going to draw Josh Norman shadow coverage, so I don't really like him. Gallup is maybe somewhat playable. Josh Doxson saw a heavy target share with McCoy at quarterback, and then Blake Jarwin's probably the minimum price tight end you're going to want to look at.
Is it Jarwin or Schultz, Tyler? You got to lean on that way. I think I have a slight lean to Jarwin. It's kind of a toss-up to me. Who do you expect to get more snaps there?
This is another low-scoring game with few red zone opportunities. I'm going to look
elsewhere
for tight end.
They're all going to Zeke and Cooper. That's where all the red zone opportunities are going. But
yeah, and that's what you want with tight ends. So I'm probably going to look at Josh Hill on the Saints as a tight end punt instead of one of these Cowboys.
All right. Let's talk about the Saints game because we all want to play these guys. What do we expect out of Alvin Kamara, Tyler? Because I know you're playing a lot of them. The problem is, he had this first game against Atlanta. That was sans Mark Ingram, right? 16 rushes, 20 targets. I'm going to guess he probably doesn't get 20 targets again. I'm going to guess he probably doesn't get 15 targets, which is how many receptions he had last time. We got to scale back a little bit. Obviously, running backs against Atlanta, they're all going to come through today. If I gave you, let's kind of take a look at what Kamara has done the past couple of weeks. He had 14 opportunities last week, 17 the week before. Those aren't workhorse, I want to play you running backs, but you sort of have to play Kamara or Ingram. You have to play one of them in, I think, every single lineup that you make this week.
I agree with that 100%. you can also play both of them in a
you can,
very hefty percentage of your lineups and bring it back with the Saints defense. I think they're 13-point favorites as of now. Huge home favorites right now. Those last two games that you mentioned where Kamara had, I think it was 14 and 16 touches. He had 22 DK points during that time period. Ingram had 16 touches during that same period. So they're pretty much going touch for touch in these last two blowouts. But where Kamara had 22 DraftKings points, Ingram had 26.8 DK points.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think this game is going to blow out, I think the smart play is actually going to Ingram here and pairing him with the Saints defense.
Yeah, and you can last year Kamara and Ingram you could have rostered on the same time. It took a lot of us a while to figure out that was something you can do. You can on a 3-game slate you can certainly do that. I like that. I want to go to Scott. Scott, how do you see this game playing? I want to talk about the Saints defense and the Atlanta offense here because we've kind of seen the Saints defense over the past couple of weeks reemerge as what they were last year, which is really holding teams to low point totals. Is this the defense or is this more they played Cincinnati without AJ Green? They played Philadelphia and Philadelphia just didn't come to play that day. What is it? Because if the Saints defense is back, this is like you got to play both of these running backs a lot. And if you think this game's going to be a shootout and the Saints defense can falter a little bit, it's a little bit more interesting of a game for me. So where do you lie in?
Well, they have one of the best run defenses in football, and that's, without factoring in that they're going to have massive game script advantages in every game they're playing in. Their cornerback one, Marshawn Lattimore, I think is one of the best shadow cornerbacks in football. Where they're weak is slot cornerback, PJ Williams, outside cornerback two, Eli Apple. I think they're two of the worst cornerbacks and starting quarterbacks in football. What that's going to do is open up good matchups for Mohamed Sanu in the slot. And I think a slightly better matchup for Calvin Ridley outside. And it's going to be a tough matchup for Julio Jones, but Julio Jones has shown he's fairly cornerback resistant throughout his career. And he's been seeing amazing volume in recent weeks, including near the end zone. I do think the Saints win. I do think the Saints win by, where Vegas has it. Maybe a touchdown or more. I think that's how you attack. I think you ignore the running backs. I think you look at the wide receivers and know that even though if the Saints are a tougher defense, the Falcons are going to have volume on their side.
What about Austin Hooper, right? We've talked all year multiple times.
The Saints are the toughest tight end.
Yeah, they're toughest.
That's 2 years in a row now.
Yeah, Ertz fell flat. Is Hooper a fish play this week to you?
Yeah.
Tyler, let's what about the Atlanta offense? We just kind of got it a little bit before we move on to the main slate. I'm kind of with Scott. I'm a little off Tevin Coleman. I'm a little off Ito Smith. I'm more in the passing game. Don't forget, this was the Calvin Ridley game, right? Calvin Ridley was crushing the Saints so bad, they had to take Marshawn Lattimore off Julio Jones to put him on Calvin Ridley in the last time. So it seems like the Falcons did have their number a little bit in that first game. I think the Saints defense is gelled a little bit better now. What are you expecting out of the Atlanta side?
It's going to be another lackluster performance like what we've seen with Cincinnati and Philly to me. I think the Saints absolutely roll in this game, and I'm trying to jam in as many Saints players as I can. But you do have to bring some players back on the other side. You can't just play 9 Saints players. So like Scott said, the best matchups in the slot here, Mohamed Sanu versus PJ Williams. We're going to take advantage of that. Calvin Ridley, 3 touchdowns in the last matchup. I think you're going to want a sprinkling of him and a sprinkling of Julio.
I think if you make tournament teams this week, at least 1, if not 2 Saints should probably be on most of your teams, if you ask me, when you're making some plays this week. Anyone else got anything else to add to the Thursday night Thanksgiving slate, or you want to kind of move it on to the main show here for the Sunday slate?
I mean, this is a odd slate where we have 2 really low scoring games and slow paces, and then we have 1 shootout on the fast track in the Superdome.
The Falcons total is the same as the Cowboys, is the same as the Bears total. Like, don't overestimate the Cowboys and the Bears a little bit in favor of if you're a Vegas person. I think I'd prefer some of the Falcons players, but their total, those three are basically equal across the board right
Yeah. It's going to be a Saints day. We just need to stay awake for it.
now. All right. Yeah. Avoid the tryptophan from the turkey. Let's move it to the main slate. Scott, for Sunday, a couple of quarterbacks here. We're going to kind of condense this just a little bit to make sure we get all the plays in here. So a couple of the quarterbacks you like for the main slate. It looks like you're looking at Jameis Winston. It looks like you're looking at Lamar Jackson. I think they're both pretty viable plays this week. They're the exact same price. Do you have a preference between one of them if forced to choose? And then give us the spiel on why both are probably really good plays.
Yeah, so I'd probably go with Jameis Winston of the two. There's going to be benching risk. I don't think it's that serious. To save face, I don't think Tampa Bay's coaches are going to again make another quarterback change.
Go back to just play Fitzpatrick. The second half Tampa Bay quarterback has been crushing it.
Right, exactly. But Tampa Bay right now holds the record for most passing yards by a team through their first 10 games all time. By FanDuel fantasy points per game, Tampa Bay team quarterback has the second most fantasy points per game all time. Only Patrick Mahomes has more. It's a bet on volume in a good matchup as well. San Francisco ranks bottom 7 in schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Then Lamar Jackson. You can read the article I cited last week. Just Google metrics that matter, Lamar Jackson. Basically, it's exactly what we saw due to his immense rushing upside, really unparalleled rushing upside. Holds the record for most rushing yards per game by a quarterback ever in college. He set the record last week for most rushing attempts by a quarterback in the Super Bowl era. Like I said, he could be woefully inefficient through the air. But if he's giving you what he's giving you on the ground, it should be a massive game. I mean, he put up 20.4 DraftKings fantasy points. That's without a single touchdown. I think they score quite a bit of touchdowns this week against Oakland. One of the worst defenses in the league. I think they rank third worst in points allowed per drive. They rank dead last in pressures forced per drop back. They're bottom 5 in fantasy points per game allowed per drop back. It's just all around terrible matchup. And if you still feel shaky about Lamar Jackson, I don't think this guy is one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league. In fact, I think he's probably one of the worst. Just look at the Vegas spread. Vegas thinks Baltimore wins by 10.5 points. So I don't think he's too risky. But like I said, I like Jameis a little bit more.
Yeah, when you're getting a quarterback that ran 27 times and threw the ball 19 times, this is unparalleled rushing floor plus passing upside. He didn't even score a touchdown. Absolutely massive potential for Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, this week. I love it. And if there's also one thing I'm sure of, it's that John Gruden is no clue how to game plan or anything like Lamar Jackson. I just feel like it would just blow his mind. Oh, this quarterback can't run in the NFL as a quarterback, and I don't think he's really going to try to.
I mean, it's just common sense, right? Rushing yards are worth 2.5 times as much as passing yards. Rushing touchdown 1.5 times as much as passing touchdown. So you're basically getting like a mid-range RB2, and then throw on 15 pass attempts on top of that. So
yeah, I think it's a great spot for Jackson. Tyler, if you don't like Winston or Lamar, what do you like at quarterback this week?
I love both those guys just to start, but another quarterback worth thinking about putting in your player pool is Carson Wentz. He's coming off that dreadful week. If you started him in cash, my condolences. I was right there with you.
My fantasy draft teams, by the way.
Yeah. It was a blow-up spot on paper, but again, that's why the games are played. I think he can go back to another great matchup here against the Giants. He played them earlier in the year, threw for 278 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. This is a game where the Eagles need to win. Major bounce-back spot here against their NFC East divisional rival. Wentz has averaged 21.9 FanDuel points since week 4, and I'm expecting this Eagles offense to rebound heavily this week and Wentz lead the way.
A couple guys I like Andrew Luck at home against Miami. At least you wouldn't think this. At least 3 touchdowns in 7 straight games for Andrew Luck through the air, fast track indoors. T.Y. Hilton, Jack Doyle, Eric Ebron, who goose egged I think last week after the 3 touchdowns the week before. But he's healthy. He's chucking it around the yard. I like Luck, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on Cam Newton quick, right? Because I think we were worried a little bit last week on the slow pace against Detroit. And while he didn't get the rushing yards, he had 357 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Some of that was due to DJ Moore having a huge game. Cam Newton seems a little bit cheap. Is anyone worried about the pace in this game, or do you think he's still going to be able to kind of get it done because he's Cam Newton and he always just finds a way to come through for us for fantasy?
This is one where I'm probably going to temper expectations just due to pace. I think it's going to be a bit of a slower matchup here. I think both quarterbacks are going to do fine, but I don't think either could be slate breaking.
Scott, you got any ideas on Newton or Luck?
Yeah, I mean they're pretty good plays. I'm kind of locked in on Jameis at the moment.
Yeah, you save a couple bucks too, and a couple of bucks goes a long way this week on the main slate, if you ask me. Moving along to running back, Scott, I guess I'll go with you first for a couple of your stud guys up towards the top. What are you looking at running back this week?
I don't have this sheet open, but I'm gonna guess I wrote up. Let's see, Leonard Fournette, who I think is probably one of the top plays of the week, especially on DraftKings. You can check my actual opportunity article. Basically, he's had the second best behind only Zeke. Expected fantasy point average since returning, massive workload. I think he's seeing like all of the team's opportunities inside the 5 and 10 yard line. I also
they're not passing either, and they're against Buffalo this week. It's just like this is a perfect smash spot for Fournette.
Yeah, absolutely. So he had bad game script the last 2 weeks and still saw amazing opportunities. So you got to think Jacksonville can beat Buffalo this week, so should get good game script. Gus Edwards, I'm a believer in him. Nick Chubb, Josh Adams, Matt Breida. I don't know. Who do you want me to key in?
Let's talk on Gus, right? Because what do we is he the new starting running back, right? Because he's been working on with the second team with Lamar Jackson. He knows how to run kind of those read options that Lamar's run, knows how to run all the plays they've installed for Lamar Jackson. Alex Collins got the touchdown, and then they just sat him for the rest of the game and threw Edwards in there because I think he understands what they're trying to do a little bit better. Do you think this is a change that's going to last throughout this game? You don't think they go back to Collins at all? This is kind of like a hot topic, I think, this week. What are we doing with Gus Edwards?
Well, I think Jackson's going to be the quarterback this week, and so I don't know how much that would matter if that is the case, but I also think it's that Alex Collins has not been good this year. He has fumble problems, and Gus Edwards, I think, is just better. At least he was better enough last week that I think they stick with him. He was PFF's highest rated running back of the week. He forced 8 missed tackles on 17 carries. He totaled 115 yards on 17 carries. So, and it was a significant difference in usage, 49 snaps to 17. I think almost the entirety of the second half as well. I think they stick with him, and, it's a great matchup. They're favored by 10.5. Like I said, Oakland's defense ranks second worst in yards allowed per carry. They're giving up the 4th most rushing fantasy points per game to running backs. I think he's a great play at a cheap price. You can also pair him with Baltimore's defense. Like I said, Vegas thinks this is a blowout, so that makes sense as well. He's a good play, but there's really a ton of really good plays at the running back position.
Yeah, I think people are going to gravitate towards Edwards. Breida's in the mid tier. I think Breida looked really good last time out, and he gets Tampa Bay, and that's an absolute smash spot. I think that's good. Marlon Mack, Nick Chubb, Leonard Fournette. I know Tyler wants to talk about Saquon if you're spending up. The Eagles have given up over 80 fantasy points over the past 2 weeks to the Cowboys and Saints, and Saquon crushed them a couple of weeks ago. They are horrible against the pass, but they're also horrible against actual good running backs. This is just Saquon's gonna smash. Melvin Gordon's gonna smash. How do you decide between those two, Tyler?
Honestly, those are the two guys I'm probably locking in for cash games on the main slate. Saquon, you just mentioned it there. 12 targets in his last game against the Eagles, went 9 for 99. He also ran for 130 yards and a score. Dude was unbelievable. He's the first building block that I'm locking in for cash games. And then Melvin Gordon's the other lock button. Great play here against the Cardinals' run defense. That's allowed the second most rushing yardage and third most fantasy points opposing backs. The last time Gordon was a double-digit favorite, he's been that way twice so far this year. 27.4 FanDuel points and 25.0 FanDuel points. So he's been doing really well as far as a safe floor for you, where I know a lot of people get worried when they see like double-digit favorites. Is Gordon going to get scripted out? Are we going to see more Eckler? Gordon's been providing consistent fantasy points in all those outings.
He's got a touchdown if they're up by like 30 or something like that. David Johnson, anybody, right?
Yep.
On the road, what's your, like, the San Diego run defense is not very strong. It seems like, Tyler, you're a little bit more on this. I like David Johnson. He's certainly going to be lower owned, right? Because Scott gave us Leonard Fournette. We have Gus Edwards. That second tier of Breida and Marlon Mack and a couple other guys look really strong to me. David Johnson, where he was super chalky last week, I think is going to go a little overlooked this week.
Yeah, I think so too, which is really surprising considering a player of his caliber and how many touches he's seeing. Coming off a 25 carry outing, 137 yards. He was the chalk last week, and somehow he's like, everyone seems to just forget about how well
he disappointed.
Yeah, he just didn't reach the end zone. I think he could see it easily here in a game here against the Chargers, who are that typical run funnel defense we like to target. A lot of touches ever since Byron Leftwich has taken over. I don't know what's not to like. The only thing that I wouldn't try to do is try to play DJ and Melvin Gordon in the same lineup, because normally that's a poor correlation, playing both running backs in the same lineup.
I know, Scott, you had some David Johnson. I want to get your thoughts on that. You've also got Josh Adams in here as kind of like the dart throw Philadelphia play. Kind of came through at a super cheap price last week, although the workload just wasn't there because they couldn't really run too much here. What are your thoughts on those two guys?
Yeah, I like David Johnson a lot. So since Byron Leftwich became the offensive coordinator, he ranks for second in carries per game, 10th in targets per game. Those targets are going to be important this week. Chargers, are expected to win by a sizable margin, and they're giving up the third most receiving fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. I like him a lot. Like I said, there's really a lot of running backs to like this week. I have it. I think I wrote down Fournette, Breida, Chubb, Edwards, Adams, Johnson. Immediately sprung to mind, and I don't think Adams is the dart throw. I think you're implying he is. So they lost 48-7, but he saw 70% of the team's carries, 75% of the team's targets, and now they're 6-point favorites up against a Giants defense that has been not good against the run since losing Damon Harrison. Easily the best run stopper in the NFL, probably the best run stopper in maybe 20 years. Before the trade, Giants were giving up 3.87 yards per carry, giving up 5.27 since.
Chris Carson, too, Mr. Broken Tackles. You chart those on Pro Football Focus. He's having a pretty good season doing that. I think he's fine. I've said this on I do the GPP Final Take show. It's for premium members here at RotoGrinders. We do a segment called My Edge, and My Edge the past 2 weeks has been running backs in the flex. It's just something from roster construction that is just clearly the way to make teams this year, especially even in tournaments. And I don't know, we just went through a laundry list of running backs. I really don't see how you make tournament teams without chucking running backs into the flex this week, in my opinion. Let's go to a wide receiver because, we're in love with all these running backs. We've got some on the high tier. We've got some on the low tier. We're going to be able to mix it up at receiver a little bit. So, Tyler, pick a couple wide receivers you're interested in. And we got any wide receiver against Philadelphia is going to be in play. Philadelphia is just atrocious on all ends of defense right now. It's Odell Beckham. That looks good. Antonio Brown's fine. You want to talk about one of them or a couple other plays?
Yeah, I'll talk about Brown. I really like him this week. Great matchup here against Denver, where he's going to avoid the tough coverage of Chris Harris Jr., where Brown runs most of his routes on the outside against Tremaine Brock, Bradley Roby. Brock is our number 49 graded cornerback, Roby number 79. Brown's averaging 10.9 targets targets per game and just been incredibly productive. 8 straight games with a touchdown now. He's pretty soon we're going to start hear announcers talk about him chasing that touchdown streak of Jerry Rice's 13. I think he continues to see another touchdown this week, to be honest, and I think he's a great play.
What about anyone want to talk about Odell Beckham? Scott, you've got him here. Like if there's ever a week for Odell Beckham to be the highest scoring receiver, this has to be it, correct?
Yeah, so he's coming off of a 4-target game. You got to think they're going to feed him a little bit more. He had double-digit targets in, 8 consecutive games before that. And now he gets a Philadelphia defense that is fielding that's not going to have a healthy, active cornerback that's been on the roster for longer than a month. And they were already the worst cornerback core in the NFL. Before that, they were they're coming into the week giving up the most fantasy points per game to outside wide receivers. Just looks like a smash spot for Odell. Going to have I might go all in. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go all in.
Yeah, it's a great. You couldn't talk me off Odell. I think it's in a fine spot. Eli Manning, I think, is certainly in play too as a tournament. Eli, Odell, Saquon, one or the other. I think that's a pretty reasonable way to start off tournament teams this week. Tyler, if we go a little bit lower, a couple of guys who have mine. The main thing I want to know, right? Mike Evans against Richard Sherman. From what I could tell, looking at the cornerback chart, looks like he's going to probably avoid Sherman on half of his snaps. Half of Mike Evans' snaps in a game with Jameis Winston chucking the ball with this prolific offense that Scott's already talked about seems pretty good to me. What's your take on Evans? More of a tournament play, obviously, than cash.
Yeah, Evans is just a guy that I don't want to fade. He's been having a ton of volume lately, even though it hasn't really translated into a lot of fantasy success. I'm not worried at all against this matchup here against San Francisco. We should see a lot of throwing in this game, and I think Evans is going to be one of the main beneficiaries of it. Not worried about matchup whatsoever.
You got Edelman down here too, I believe. Talk to me on Edelman. I think the price seems a little high for me. Is there something about the specific matchup that stands out to you?
Yeah, I really like targeting Buster Screen in the slot, who's been in and out due to injury, but when he's in there, he's been performing pretty poorly, allowing a 128.8 quarterback rating when targeted against, 3 touchdowns allowed on the season. Just opposing slot receivers, if you go by the game logs, have done incredibly well against the Jets to date. And I think it's just a great matchup for Edelman here.
Yeah, I think that's good. Keenan Allen's another guy, Scott. I don't know if you had him written down, but I noted looking at the PFF charts, he'll see about half his snaps away from Patrick Peterson as well. He plays a lot in the slot. Peterson's only played, I think, 1% of his snaps in the slot. I'm not expecting him to follow Keenan Allen in there. The Chargers are going to score, I think, a lot of points in this game. Gordon's going to get his. And second half, Keenan Allen, it's reemerged this year. He's just getting peppered with targets right now. I think Allen's probably a little too cheap as well.
Right. He smashed against Seattle in week 9 and smashed Oakland in week 10. And then week 11, I wrote him up as a dud against Chris Harris Jr. I mean, you don't target Chris Harris Jr. and, he gave up the most yards he's given up since 2014, I think, or 2015. And Keenan Allen saw 12 targets against him, posted a big game, 89 yards and a touchdown. So obviously it seems they want to get him the ball. Now he gets a way softer matchup this week. But I think Julian Edelman's a way better play, personally.
If AJ Green's out or in, I don't know. I guess let's talk Tyler Boyd for a second here. What are we doing with Tyler Boyd? 6,000. If AJ Green's in, if AJ Green's out, anyone have a strong take? Which do we want? Do we want the more efficient Tyler Boyd with AJ Green opposite of him? Or do we want more targets but better coverage on him with AJ Green out? Anyone have a strong take here?
Yeah, I don't want him. Cleveland's been good against the slot for 2 years now, like one of the top 5 or 10 best defenses. Just not really too interested in him.
All right, we'll pass that. Tyler, you got anything in the mid-tier to low-tier value we can find at receiver this week?
Yeah, 5,500, Manny Sanders. What are they doing? That is way too cheap for a player of his caliber with the number of targets he's drawing. Absolutely smash play here. Per our wide receiver quarterback matchup chart, the one that displays where points are being accredited to, like the left, right, or slot. Pittsburgh's allowing the 5th most fantasy points to opposing slot receivers. So I think this is a huge spot here for Manny Sanders. They're 3-point dogs, should be passing heavily. I think they made a big error here, making him 5,500.
DJ Moore, last week's GPP winner. Scott, he was 4,200 on DK last week, 31.7 fantasy points. He's 4,600. I'm going to guess somewhere in their algorithm, the pace of this game has kind of kept his salary probably a little bit lower than I think it was going to be. What's your status on kind of DJ Moore? Obviously, one of the best athletes we've seen at receiver in the combine in a while. Was that a fluke? I don't think it was a fluke, but is that repeatable against Seattle this week?
Yeah, I mean, the matchup's not that tough. I try not to go back to well on these guys after, their biggest game of their career. But, he's definitely in play. Not someone I'm super excited to play. Funchess actually has the way better matchup, but yeah, he's in play. Just not someone who's high on my list right now. But early.
Tyler, I got a couple other names. You mentioned Emmanuel Sanders. Sutton still this is the big play guy. He hasn't put it all together yet. Are we looking at? I don't know. I don't want to call it a DJ Moore type breakout game. Do you think something like that could happen for Sutton here?
It's possible, but I mean, our guy Jeff Heuerman's just crushing it.
He didn't crush it last week.
No.
I don't even want to talk about James O'Shaughnessy, so we're just going to forget that conversation happened with Scott.
I don't think any tight ends showed up last week except Antonio Gates.
Yeah. When Antonio Gates in 2018 is leading the tight end, he led all tight ends in fantasy production last week.
We'll just move past that quickly. Going back to Sutton, the Steelers have actually done pretty well guarding wide receivers on the perimeter over the past few weeks. That was a major liability for them while they were injured. They've gotten much more healthy on the back end. I'd rather go with Sanders here and attack the middle of the field against Pittsburgh instead.
So I think I actually haven't. I've been so busy with basketball and writing up the Thursday slate for football. I haven't actually put together a lineup. And Scott, I'm looking at salaries. I'm toying around with things on DK. It seems like I almost always jam in the high price running backs, but with Fournette, with guys like Mack and Breda and Gus Edwards, the receivers I want are Odell Beckham and Antonio Brown and Keenan Allen and Julian Edelman. Those seem like the receivers I want. At first look, I think I might be flipping around my strategy for the first time all season here.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously how I'm viewing it. I also like DeAndre Hopkins quite a bit. He's another top play this week.
Not on the main slate.
Oh, is he not?
No.
Monday night?
Yeah, it's the Monday
I always do that. I always have one guy. But yeah, I'm with you. Although, I also like the cheap quarterback. I also like I'm going to like one cheap tight end.
Mm-hmm.
So
everybody's going to like one cheap tight end. So we're going to have the chalkiest tight end I think we've seen all season.
James O'Shaughnessy, let's go.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
No?
We're not going to repeat that. Let's get to tight ends. So, all right, let's get the chalk out of the way. Is everyone on Cameron Brate this week, right?
Yeah, you have to be. I mean, the IR designation for OJ Howard came after pricing was out. He's this week's free space. We see the relationship that Jameis Winston has with Brate. Ignore the end of season stats where Brate was injured. The two are always on the same page, and he has just as high a chance to score as any other tight end this week.
Yeah, you combine Brate and Howard. It's always tough to do this because they can bring in another tight end, and this is like rivaling Travis Kelce, like even better type numbers here. So Scott, was Brate your cheap tight end? The whole world knows to play Cameron Brate this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've talked about this quite some time. It just seems like the fantasy gods are making everything come together perfectly for Brate week. We have Winston back at starting quarterback. So since he entered the league, 40.3% of his touchdowns have gone to tight ends. That's the highest rate among 37 qualifying quarterbacks. League average rate, almost half that at 24.4%. Like I've written about all offseason, he's a guy who's hyper efficient when targeting tight ends for whatever reason, not so for wide receivers, especially not outside wide receivers. By the way, Adam Humphries is his guy, really high target share with Winston and not Fitzpatrick. But you got to pay attention to those sort of things. So on top of, an amazing situation with no more OJ Howard, guaranteed larger workload than typical, still low salary. He also gets the Jameis Winston bump. So he's a 100% exposure to guy this week. Outside of that, only guy to look at is Zach Ertz, I think.
No. I mean, I want to ask Tyler on this one. So is it Ertz who that offense completely disappeared last week? Now, there is some reason, right? Ertz, New Orleans tight ends. We had Golden Tate coming back here. Do you want to mess around with that? Or do you want George Kittle, who is like, this dude is just crushing right now? He's a little cheaper. Am I crazy to think Kittle's better than Ertz this week?
Yeah, that's recency bias in effect, man. Just go back to Ertz. Ertz is going to smash.
All right. I don't know on this one. I think I might be against you guys. I do like Kittle. Let's talk. Let's spend a minute or two on anyone have a Gronk take coming back, had some extra time off, risk of re-injury, possibly still not 100%. I mean, Gronk's never going to be 100% ever again. Just his body's gone through too much. We've got a cheap price on him. I don't know. If Gronk was 5,100 last year or a couple years ago, he'd be 100% owned. I still don't think he's going to be really highly owned this week. Anyone have a take on him?
That's getting way too cute for me. Gonna easily have 0 shares.
Oh, even at 5,100. All right, Tyler.
Ditto. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Need to see it first.
Greg Olson, Vance McDonald. I think you could probably play either one of them. Jack Doyle, I think, is probably a little bit too cheap. You're looking for everyone in tournaments is going to play Brate because he's going to be like 25, 30% owned by the time the new cycle hits, and it's going to get you what you want in the rest of your lineup. So if you're looking for swerves, we got David Njoku, 3,800, should get pretty heavily targeted. It's against Cincinnati. Cincinnati is basically like Tampa Bay of the AFC right now, if you ask me in terms of defense.
Oh, who you could play?
Who can we play? James O'Shaughnessy.
Jared Cook. Yeah. There's just so many injuries going on there. Jordy Nelson is questionable. LaFell is out. Martavis Bryant.
I don't like that they purposefully take him off the field because he's by far their best player and they want to lose.
Yeah, that must be it because he's legitimately their best receiver right now, like their only healthy receiver. But also the Ravens have a tendency to funnel volume towards end production, towards the tight end position. 26% of their receiving fantasy points allowed that's gone to tight ends. That ranks second most among all defenses. And Oakland should be funneling volume and production towards their tight end because they don't have anything else. But yeah, we'll see.
Ricky Seals-Jones as chalk last week, not a good play. As non-chalk in tournaments this week, anyone going back to it?
No.
Looks like a
analysis there.
Looks like right. A pass from the crowd. And Scott, I learned my lesson on James O'Shaughnessy, but could he get some more? They just don't. This is a running team now. It is no longer a passing team, and they aren't going to need to pass. In particular to James O'Shaughnessy to beat the Bills.
Right. I mean, it was weird, man. The Jacksonville tight end one had like 6-7 targets in like 10 consecutive games and then just poof. But
Leonard Fournette comes back and it's
play Fournette.
Yeah, play Fournette instead here. So that's some of our thoughts for the Thanksgiving slate and some main slate analysis for you guys that listen a little bit later in the week on the podcast. Fun show. Everybody enjoy Thanksgiving except the Grinch over here. Scott going to be shoveling some Popeyes or some McDonald's drive-through into his mouth while he sweats furiously behind the keyboard, typing up articles for us to read on Pro Football Focus. Me and Tyler will enjoy it for you, and I'll make sure I eat all of the peanut butter pie. I don't know if you heard it during the show, all the banging downstairs, but I'm getting peanut butter pie made right now, so I can't wait to go have some as soon as I get out of here. Tyler, have a happy Thanksgiving. Scott, all the viewers, everyone, thanks for watching. We appreciate all you guys tuning in and watching all the shows here. So for my two buddies, I'm Britt. Thanks for watching, and we out ya.